Some people collect paintings, others collect watches. Nick Mason collects the cars that change the history of motorsport. Hidden away in the English countryside is a garage containing machines driven by Juan Manuel Fangio, cars that conquered Le Mans, and perhaps the most valuable Ferrari ever built. These are not display pieces. They are cars that shaped racing history, and Nick Mason has spent 50 years making sure they never stop moving. The collector behind the collection. Mason is best known as the drummer and co-founder of Pink Floyd, the band that produced Dark Side of the Moon, one of the best-selling albums in history. He is the only person ever inducted into both the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Motorsport Hall of Fame. That double membership tells you something important. For Mason, cars were never a hobby that arrived after the music. They came at the same time and have never left. He has raced at Le Mans 5 times as a competitor. He drives his cars at the Goodwood Festival of Speed every year. His collection operates under a personal racing team called 10/10ths. These are not trophies. They are machines he intends to use. What makes his garage extraordinary is not what it costs to assemble. It is what it represents. A private archive of motorsport history spanning a century, maintained by someone who believes these objects deserve to be driven, not stored. 1927 Bugatti, Type 35. B, the lineage that won more races than any other. The Bugatti Type 35 family became one of the most successful racing car lineages in history, recording around 2,000 victories between 1924 and 1930. In an era before Formula One existed, before sponsorship, before the modern racing infrastructure that governs the sport today, the Type 35 simply dominated every series it entered. Mason's example is the Type 35B, the supercharged variant, with the enlarged engine that pushed the car beyond 134 miles per hour at a time when most roads were unpaved and safety equipment consisted largely of optimism. He bought it in the 1970s, rebuilt it, and raced it across the following decade. It appears regularly at Goodwood revival events, nearly a century old, still moving under its own power. That, in itself, is a form of preservation that no museum can replicate. 1957 Maserati 250F, the car that won with Fangio. In 2009, a panel of motorsport historians voted the Maserati 250F the greatest racing car in the world. Not the greatest of its era, the greatest ever made. One of only 26 ever built, the 250F was the dominant Formula One machine of the mid-1950s. Juan Manuel Fangio, widely regarded as the finest driver in the history of the sport, used one to win his 5th World Championship in 1957. Delivering at the German Grand Prix one of the most celebrated comeback drives ever witnessed in motorsport. Stirling Moss also raced the 250F. The car was a fixture at the front of the most significant races of its generation. Mason owns one. He races it himself at historic events. The idea of driving a car that Fangio used to win a world championship on the same circuits where that championship was contested belongs to a category of experience that most enthusiasts can barely imagine. 1955 Jaguar D-Type, 3 Le Mans victories and 1 accidental purchase. The Jaguar D-Type won the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1955, 1956, and 1957. 3 consecutive victories that established it as one of the most successful endurance racing cars ever built. Mason has called it one of the most beautiful cars ever made, a verdict most automotive historians would not challenge. He bought it in the 1970s, slightly before the Ferrari 250 GTO entered his life. The circumstances connecting the two purchases are among the most entertaining stories in collector history. When he went to buy the GTO, his financial advisor suggested taking along a second desirable car as a potential trade, in case the seller preferred an exchange. Mason brought the D-Type. The GTO seller, it turned out, simply needed cash and accepted money. Mason drove home having acquired the GTO and kept the D-Type as well. 2 of the most significant motorsport cars of the 20th century, owned simultaneously because a seller preferred cash to a swap. Ferrari 512S, the race car that went to Hollywood. Mason's Ferrari 512S has a biography that crosses between racing history and cinema. It raced officially for Ferrari in 1970, finishing 3rd at Daytona and 1st at Sebring, results that placed it among the most successful sports prototypes of its season. Then it was acquired by Steve McQueen's Solar Productions for the filming of Le Mans, the 1971 film that remains the most authentic portrayal of endurance racing ever committed to cinema. McQueen's production team used genuine race cars on the actual Le Mans circuit, with professional drivers and real racing conditions. The 512S was part of that filming process. It was damaged during production. It left the set not as a racing car, but as a damaged film prop. Mason acquired it and restored it over years, working with former Swiss racing driver Herbert Mueller, who supplied the original spare parts needed to return it to running condition. A race car, turned film prop, turned wreck, restored to its original specification by the man who now owns it. Every stage of that biography belongs to motorsport history. 1962. Ferrari 250 GTO. The car that defined a life. In 1964, a 16-year-old Nick Mason stood in the grandstands at Goodwood Circuit with his father and watched a Ferrari 250 GTO race. He did not know then that he would own it. 13 years later, in 1977, he bought it. He paid £35,000, funded by royalties from Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here, two of the best-selling albums ever recorded. The specific car he purchased, chassis 3757 GT, had finished third at the 1962 24 Hours of Le Mans. It has never been restored. The patina, the wear, the accumulated evidence of its racing life remains in the metal. Only 36 were ever built. The GTO defined Ferrari's dominance of GT racing in the early 1960s and remains the most revered production racing car in history. Mason has used it in ways that make most collectors uncomfortable to contemplate. He has raced it at historic events. He gave Brian Johnson of AC/DC a passenger ride in it, filmed and widely shared. During Pink Floyd's 1987 Momentary Lapse of Reason tour, a financial dispute threatened the band's ability to fund European and American concerts. The payment guarantee that secured the tour was Mason's Ferrari 250 GTO, a car used as collateral so a rock band could keep playing. His daughter was driven to her wedding in it. The car a teenager watched from the grandstands in 1964 has been present at some of the most significant moments of his adult life. That relationship between a person and a machine, sustained across half a century, is not something money can engineer. It can only be lived. 1996 McLaren F1 GTR. The deal that defined the collection. The youngest car in Mason's collection arrived through one of the most unusual transactions in automotive history. Ron Dennis, then head of McLaren, wanted an Indy car that Mason happened to own. Mason wanted a McLaren F1 GTR. They swapped. The GTR is among the rarest variants of the already rare McLaren F1. Only 28 GTR spec racers were built. Of those, just 9 left the factory in the 1996 specification of Mason's example. His specific car, Chassis 10R, was McLaren's own press and development vehicle, used during official testing at the 1996 24 Hours of Le Mans. It was also the first GTR approved for road use. Mason crashed it at Goodwood's members' meeting. He had it repaired. He continues to use it. There is something characteristic about that sequence of events. In another collection, a crashed McLaren F1 GTR might become a cautionary tale. In Mason's garage, it is simply a chapter in an ongoing story. What this collection actually is. Nick Mason has described his collection as a curious muddle of cars. That is characteristic understatement from a man who owns one of the most significant private assemblies of motorsport history ever accumulated. From a Bugatti that raced in the 1920s to a McLaren acquired in a swap with one of motorsport's most powerful figures, every machine in this garage carries a history that textbooks record and enthusiasts spend lifetimes studying. Mason has spent 50 years not merely owning these cars, but keeping them alive, racing them, driving them at events, allowing them to continue doing what they were built to do. Nick Mason didn't just collect historic race cars. He made sure history kept moving. Subscribe to Directive for more deep dives into the world's greatest automotive collections, and tell us in the comments, which car from Nick Mason's garage would you most want to see race?